What's your favourite day of the week? Probably most people would say Friday, because we're coming up to the weekend. Unless, of course, you work on a Saturday, then it may not be. And of course there's the hump day, Wednesday. That's quite a dodgy name, that. It's the middle, it's the hump before you descend towards the weekend. Wednesday is an interesting word to pronounce. If you look at it, it seems like you would want to pronounce it Wednesday or Wednesday. It seems quite difficult when you look at the syllables and things and the spelling, but I think it's pronounced Wednesday. Wednesday. You cut out some of the syllables, and but I don't think many people would say Monday's their favourite day. I used to have a lecturer at college who allowed me, it was a woman, and she allowed me, her name was Barbara, she allowed me a computer out over the weekend, a laptop, and when I gave it back in the Monday, she would always look very sad, and I said to her, "Are you okay?" when I was handing the computer back, and she said, "Yeah, I just don't like Mondays." In 1979, Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats released a single, and it went to number 1 in the UK. I don't know what happened in America, but it meant that the Boomtown Rats were in high public perception, with Bob Geldof being the band leader. And Bob Geldof wrote the story after an American schoolgirl, Brenda Spencer. She shot dead several of her classmates in January 1979, and when she was asked what was the reason for doing it, she said, "I don't like Mondays." So, in 1980, I was working at RAF Pitreavie Castle, which is it looks a bit innocent, it looks innocuous, and that's your fact. When you go through the doors and into the castle, you jump into a big tube, a pneumatic tube, and you head out for miles, and you go right down underground into a bunker, a nuclear bunker. And I used to work down there under the city, and I didn't live in Dunfermline at that time. I lived in Edinburgh in a flat in Stockbridge, which is a very posh area in Edinburgh, equivalent to Kelvinside in Glasgow. Posh. And I lived in a flat there in Rayburn Place, and that area, very interesting, beautiful area, and it's got lots of little shops and nooks and crannies and pubs that are interesting in their character at the time, 1980, and one was called the Antiquary, and it was down below in a kind of basement type of slot. So you go down these creaky stairs with a wrought iron railing, and you go into this Antiquary, and that was what the area was like. Lots of little fancy, interesting places, and it had lots of shops, bookshops, and some people may call them junk shops. What is Edinburgh? And we know Edinburgh can be pretentious, and so they called them antique shops. So on one of my afternoons off, I was wandering along in Stockbridge, and I went into an antique shop, and at that time I was beginning to get into photography, and I'd purchased an Olympus OM10 SLR camera, single lens reflex. Now they call them DSLRs, digital SLR, digital single lens reflex. But this was one. What that meant was you could change the lenses on it and get different long lenses or short lenses, wide angle or long telephoto, and you had many choices of film, 35mm film. So they were very popular in the early 80s, SLR film cameras. And I was just getting into photography, so I would take pictures of Edinburgh in the middle of the night, middle of the day, all times, because I was working shift work. And at the time, a guy called David Bailey was doing adverts on the TV, and he was the most well-known photographer in public perception. So I used to be setting up a tripod on the Mound in Edinburgh or on Princes Street and taking long exposures. And people used to shout at me, "Who do you think you are? David Bailey? Here he is, David Bailey." And I used to get people shouting at me, and drunk people coming up and trying to punch me and saying, "It's David Bailey." So it was quite hazardous, and quite a few times the police arrested me for taking pictures, even in those days. So, but that's another story, because what happened here was I was walking down Raeburn Place heading towards the little shops, and I went into this antique shop, and I was looking at something in the counter. I think it was lenses, camera lenses. And I stepped back, and I bumped into someone. I literally bumped into somebody who was standing behind me. And I looked around, and somebody was quite tall, quite a few inches taller than me. I'm 5'10", so not particularly short. And this guy was clearing me by quite a few inches, and he had dishevelled hair. And I thought, I know that guy. His face is very familiar to me. I mean, this is really odd, because I know his face, and then I saw somebody else come in the shop, and this man had pyjamas on. And I thought, what? There's a guy there with very light, stripy pyjamas. And I thought, and then I thought, oh, that clicked. That's Johnny Fingers. Johnny Fingers. And I looked, and there's another couple of guys there. It's the Boomtown Rats. So I bumped into Bob Geldof, the man himself, and the Boomtown Rats. And I didn't have my camera with me. So I thought, if I tell this to anybody, they'll just say, you're making that up. So I went back, which was 5 minutes away to my flat, and got my camera, the Olympus OM10, put film into it, and came back out and started to look around to see if I could find the rats again. And they were walking around Raeburn Place itself, quite near a big Woolworth shop selling haberdashery, knickknacks, bits and bobs, whatever you call it. And the rats were hanging about there. And I thought, yeah, they're probably playing tonight in concert at the Usher Hall. And this was at the peak of their fame, because they'd had this #1 hit, and they were quite famous in America as well. I don't think they hit the #1 slot, but they were becoming well known out there and across the pond. So I picked up my camera, and lucky they were still there. So I went up to Johnny Fingers. He was shorter than me, so perhaps that's why I approached him first. And I said, "What are you doing?" Which I think is a pretty daft question. And he gave me a rather surly answer. He said, "Well, just walking. Just walking." I thought, not very approachable. But it was a pretty daft question. And so I looked over to Bob to see if he could maybe help me. And I realised that everybody seemed to pivot around Bob, and he was much taller than them, and they were like a pack of dogs. They all moved around, and as he moved about, Bob walked about, they all kind of followed him. So he very much looked like a leader. So Bob says to me, "You want a photograph?" I said, "Yeah, that would be great." And he was very decent to me, really nice, and showing quite a lot of empathy. So he made a kind of head flick, looked around and gathered his mates, and they all stood in front of this Woolworths shop front window and posed like an album cover. Bob was smiling, he doesn't do that very often. And they all stood there, and I got a photograph. And then I said thanks a lot, and then Bob smiled at me, and off they went. And it made a big impression on me, because he was such a decent guy, and as I was taking the pictures, people were doing a double take. They were wandering along Rayburn Place, and people were looking over, and they saw Bob Geldof and the Rats, and I thought, this must be what it's like for them all the time, to be famous. People wander by and keep doing a double take, as if to say, did I really see that? Just like what happened when I bumped into him in the shop. So this made a big impression on me, how decent he treated me. And then sometime later, 1985, he'd organised Live Aid, the biggest concert in the world, and he was highly respected at the time, but getting quite a lot of criticism as it just been some sort of publicity stunt. And I thought, no, I know he's a decent guy, because before all that, I just bumped into him and I was a stranger, and he treated me very well. So I was always rooting for Bob and saying, no, he really was decent, and that's in his nature. So that's my impression of Bob and the Rats, and this is all based around Monday, the day of the week.